Hello, hello, hello. My name is Kyle Van Voors with Voors.com, and in this video, I'm going to share with you the 3 core tenets of building an incredibly effective sales team. Building a sales team is not just an art. It's a science. There are core fundamentals that are necessary in order to have a strong, repeatable sales process. Of course, there's some people who ignore the fundamentals and still do well, and those people are usually really charismatic and they're able to drive really strong results because they're a really strong people leader. These folks are not the norm. And I would argue if you take someone like that and give them strong systems and processes, magic will happen. In this video, I want to share with you 3 core tenets of having a really strong inside sales team so you don't have to rely on some magic hire with charm and charisma to lead your sales team. So I call these the 3 M's. Let's go through each one. So when I was running the SDR team at an early stage startup company, one of the challenges I ran into at one point was all of a sudden our sales accepted opportunity rate fell through the floor. We had really consistent results for a long time, and 1 month, everything crumbled. And the opportunities that were being generated by the SDRs were just not being marked qualified by the salespeople. So this was a real head scratcher because I had no idea why, frankly. And I'm looking at all of the data, and all I know is that the outcomes were not matching what our inputs were. I was used to having a team that generally had very consistent results. So what happened? And at this time, I didn't have a strong understanding of the first tenet: metrics. Metrics are incredibly important, not just for the outcomes, but for every little part of what's required to make those outcomes a reality. So for the SDR team, it might be the amount of calls that they make, the amount of those calls that are actually answered, the amount of those answered calls that are actually booked meetings, and finally, the amount of those booked meetings that actually show up. And then number 5 is that they're actually qualified. So what happened in my case is that number 5, the qualified, fell through the floor. And what I ended up finding out was the VP of sales changed the qualifications without telling me and my team. So we weren't able to adjust what we were doing to make sure that we were only passing over qualified opportunities. By not understanding the metrics really well, then I couldn't properly navigate through this difficult time, which created a lot of strain on the organization for 2 months while we tried to figure out why our team's output wasn't where it needed to be. The next tenet I actually want to illustrate with a client story of ours. So we were working with a client that had a small sales development team and a really large sales team that were kind of split, which is unique. It's not uncommon for SDRs to report directly to marketing, but in this case, they were pretty separated. They didn't coordinate very, very well. Well, at one point, the client decided to change the reporting structure from marketing to sales so that that way they could have a stronger relationship. And I think ultimately, it was a good decision, but there was one small problem. The sales leader was so overwhelmed with running the sales team there that they didn't take time to meet regularly with the SDRs. So what happened? SDR performance plummeted. Well, that's not good because the sales team relies on the SDR team for a lot of their deals and a lot of their opportunities that are coming through. Once we realized this, we were able to make changes to be able to give the SDRs the support they need and the leadership that they need, and also have that stronger connection between sales and marketing. Now, the reason why this happened in the first place is because they didn't fully have that second tenet figured out yet, which is methodology. What are the series of methods for every part of running a sales team that are required to effectively run that part of the sales organization? So an example of a method is meeting rhythm. How often? What's the cadence of your meeting with the sales team, with the SDR team? And what do those meetings consist of? There's a method there, and you want to use that when you're running a team to ensure that you're going to be well positioned to be successful. Now, the third one, I'll use another client story here. We were working with a client that was really struggling with getting their potential customers to consider switching from their current solution to the one that they were providing. They were in a very competitive space, and they were always talking to companies that were using somebody else at the time. And it can be difficult to try to convince those people. Well, What it turned out was that the client didn't have strong messaging around their differentiator. What do you do differently which would justify switching from what they're doing today to what they were trying to accomplish? So where was the problem? Well, it was the third tenet. They didn't have effective messaging. And by having really strong messaging, your sales team is going to be able to internalize what it's going to take to be successful in their role, but even more importantly, properly help the prospects navigate the best decision for their business. In the case of this client, it was understanding what the differentiators were, because that differentiator is something that added a lot of value. So it did justify making a change. Alrighty, so just to recap here, the 3 M's, metrics. You gotta understand the metrics, not only the high-level outcome metrics, but also the inputs, the different conversion rates. You wanna understand all of the metrics. The second one, methodology, the series of methods that are best practices and are required to having a really well-functioning sales team. And then the third one, messaging. You have to make sure that your messaging is resonating with your audience. If not, you're going to have a really difficult time converting them. If you want to watch another video on building a sales team, check this one out.